There are a lot of careers today that require that little something called continuing education. If you're a doctor or a nurse, you're expected to take regular classes or seminars to keep you up to date with the latest developments, which I don't know about you, but that gives me a lot of safety and feel a little bit more relaxed knowing that they're a little more up to date. Wouldn't it be just a thrill to go to your doctor and find out that they graduated in 1968 and they haven't done anything since? They might be a little behind. Engineers, computer programmers, a lot of other professions make it a part of their professional requirements that there be continual learning. Teachers at every level are expected to keep up with continuing education, although I read an opinion recently by a newspaper columnist who argued against continuing education for teachers. The smarter they get, he reasoned, the more likely they are to get into some line of work that pays real money. Pastors have the same kind of requirements for continuing education. Like other careers, it might involve seminars or conferences or some kind of class. It might be an opportunity to learn a new skill or to find out some new information, and sometimes it's just to refresh what you already know. Sadly, there is one place where continuing education is, well, it's encouraged, but it's not required, and it's the church. We expect our children to attend Sunday school, and when they get old enough, we hope that they will attend confirmation classes and explore their personal faith and to learn more about how we Presbyterians express our Christianity. But once that happens, many good church-going Christians assume they're done and have everything they need to know. It's amazing. They attend church on Sundays. Many of them might be involved with missions. Some might even serve as officers in their churches. And yet, for some reason, they stop learning anything new in church or doing anything to explore their own personal faith. And I hate to tell you this, but a 15-minute sermon is not continuing education. You can't begin to get enough exploration of your personal faith with a sermon. We're supposed to do just give you a little taste of something that makes you say, maybe I should think about something else. One of the reasons we Presbyterians have such a strong heritage in secondary education is because of our faith. Did you realize that in the United States, Presbyterians have started more secondary institutions like colleges than any other denomination? There's a reason for it. That person that started it all, John Calvin. I'd say it has a lot to do with Calvin because in pastoring Geneva, Switzerland, he created a college because he firmly believed in the religious training of children. He especially along with Luther and others, didn't like the idea that it was only the priest that had all the knowledge. And if there was any kind of education, it was only for those who were the elites, the nobility. So he set up a different college, one that had two divisions, a public school and a seminary. The public school was known as Calvin College, the secondary school, the University of Geneva. And historians have stated that both of Calvin's schools were the forerunners of modern public education, partially because they were tuition-free. The letters of Paul that Meredith was reading from this morning are actually part of Paul's continuing education for churches he helped found. Most of Paul's letters are efforts to mediate between conflict going on inside a church. The source of those problems, though, is the same as it is today. Our temptation always is to go our own way, to think we know better than God and to go after worthless things. Daily, we need a foundation that comes from God's Spirit. And we need to be with other believers from whose hearts also experience that same feeling of Holy Spirit. We need to read and hear the words of the prophets, no matter how much those words can sting. We need the encouraging and sometimes demanding instructions from letters like Hebrews, no matter how much they reveal about how far we may have fallen by the wayside. We need the perils of Jesus, no matter how much it is embarrassing sometimes to see ourselves in some of those stories. And the thing is, we can't do discipleship alone. We can't do this continuing education alone. You can only learn so much by listening to podcasts or reading books or anything by yourself. It's interacting with other people that allows real learning to take place. If we want to access courage and encouragement and real guidance, we do it in the community. And the way you start is by recognizing we need to do it. Oh, and one other thing. Becoming a true disciple of Jesus requires that we do it in community. Jesus didn't call individual disciples, teach them one at a time. He brought them in a group. All of his teachings were for a group. All of his teachings were about how you live in community as much as anything. So how do we expect that we are going to be Christians all on our own? I know that some people, one of the things I was really hoping to do by going outside is to at least get some of those people that say, well, I didn't go to church on Sunday, but I went to something just as good. I was outside in God's creation. Darn it, and here I was hoping we were going to have church outside so I could say, well, here you go. Join us right here. Jill Duffield, editor of the Presbyterian Outlook, wrote this. She said, discipleship done all on our own is no discipleship at all. Disciples have to follow. Discipleship requires a lifetime of learning from God and from others. Disciples know that no matter how much knowledge they acquire, there is always more to learn from God, the source of living water that never stops flowing and giving growth. Discipleship cannot be perfected via YouTube videos or podcasts. It has to be lived in community with the powerful and the marginalized and everybody in between. Disciples are to share what they've learned about life and faith at barbecues, good news, and at coffee break conversations at work, around family dinner tables, even in committee work. No matter where we are or who we're with, disciples must look to the God who saved us, sustains us, calls us, and sends us. We must look to the perfect example of our faith, Jesus Christ, and then decide where to sit, who to include, what to share, and how to care, and most of all, when to act. Yesterday was one of those learning opportunities for myself and for others too. A number of us from Grace Covenant took part. Sue and I, along with Sally Hinchman, Joe Randolph, Diane Schmidt, Harold Fry, Don Wilson, we all joined a number of other Presbyterians. Oh, and Jennifer Battaglia. I knew I'd forget one. We all joined a bunch of other folks at our Presbytery meeting yesterday, which took place in St. Joseph. Now, we were told that it was going to be a different type of Presbytery meeting, and it was. We did all our business over lunch. But we were there from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, which meant there was a lot of other things going on. We were taking part in something called Fearless Dialogues, led by the Reverend Dr. Greg Ellison II and Dr. Jojo Legister. Fearless Dialogues is an organization committed to creating unique spaces for unlikely partners to engage in heartfelt conversations that see gifts in others, hear value in stories, and work for change and positive transformation in self and others. Now, that's a lot of stuff all condensed into one sentence. Now, one of the reasons, though, for bringing the Fearless Dialogues group to the Presbytery was because part of our work going on right now is to deal with some of the racism that's been prevalent throughout the community and even in the Presbytery at times. But the problem we had was many of us, I think, thought that was the primary thing we were going to get out of it, that it was all about dealing with racism, when it was so much more than that. It turned out to be one of the better learning experiences I've had in recent years. In today's scripture lesson from the letter to the Hebrews, it says, "Let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, but by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it." Think about those commands, and then I want you to hear these 4 fundamental needs that we learned about yesterday. Need number 1 is a sense of belonging. We all have an innate need to belong. And when that goes unmet, our second need starts to unravel, and that second need is a sense of self-esteem. When that isn't met, we start to question ourselves and our value. Number 3 need is a sense of control. When people feel unseen, they'll act out trying to regain some sense of control in their lives, to feel recognized and valued. William James is an American philosopher and psychologist, and the first educator to offer a psychology course in the United States. He was a leading thinker in the late 19th century. Think about this again. We're talking about 1800s. He was an influential philosopher, and he wrote, "No more fiendish punishment could be devised were such a thing physically possible than that one should be turned loose in society and remain absolutely unnoticed by all the members thereof. If no one turned around when we entered, answered when we spoke, or minded what we did, but if every person we met cut us dead and acted as if we were non-existent things, a kind of rage and impotent despair would before long well up in us, from which the cruelest bodily torture would be a relief." I thought about that. I think about all the times we hear about the stories of people who've committed crimes or some of the shootings that take place, or mass shootings around the world. And so often we hear that these people are loners, that they don't have much in the way of community. Maybe they feel like they haven't had a sense of belonging. Maybe they don't feel valued. All I know is I looked at that and heard the words of William James, and I recognized one of the biggest flaws that we have going on in the church, and I mean the big church: our busyness. On a typical Sunday morning, we have greeters at the door on Sunday morning, and they do a wonderful job. But how often do you see people scurrying in the halls? And scurrying is we're like mice. We run back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Maybe it's musicians getting things set up. Maybe it's Sue or I going back and forth like that. We all run around doing things that keep us from having real interaction with people. Too often it's, "Hi, good to see you, how are you?" And then people come in the door. Or they don't get here till right before the service, and they come inside. And we don't interact with you. How often do you think that there are people that maybe come to church, not just here, but all around the country, think that they come into churches, they sit down, people say hi, but unless they're part of some group, that then they get up and leave, and that's been it in church. They haven't had that experience of actually really connecting with another human being. They haven't had that experience of being valued. For many of us, we have our personal friends in our groups that when church is done, that's the first place we gravitate towards to. And I understand that. We're glad to see our friends, and sometimes that's when we see each other, is on Sundays. But how many people then get left on the sideline? Some of us are busy on a Sunday morning, and I know that's how Sue and I operate, and many others do also. But I find myself asking if some of those so-called important activities we're doing are really much less important than just taking the time to be with people. And by the way, I'm talking about many of us, not just myself, but what work could we be doing that is more valuable than connecting with other people? Think about that. I thought about it in terms of need number 4, which is a sense of meaningful existence. The question they'd asked us is said, if you died tomorrow, what would be the answer? What would anyone care if you died tomorrow? What could be more meaningful than lifting up other people? Not what we accomplished, not what we built. What could be more important than lifting up other people in their lives? When Paul wrote in his letter to the Romans, contribute to the needs of God's people and welcome strangers into your home. Bless people who harass you, bless you and don't curse them. Be happy with those who are happy and cry with those who are crying. Consider everyone as equal and don't think you're better than anyone else. Don't pay back anyone for their evil actions with evil actions, but show respect for what everyone else believes is good. If possible, to the best of your ability, live at peace with all people. I sometimes wonder, we have fights going on all the time. They call them the culture wars sometimes. And often it's held up in terms of church and religion, but so many of those things that people think are things we need to be fighting about and arguing about are really way down on the list of things that Jesus and Paul listed for us. I mean, You can think of some of the main issues that sometimes come in culture, but what would be more important than contributing to the needs of people and welcoming strangers into your home, to lifting people up, to being at peace with others, instead of being in the way some of us interact with one another, with violence, with anger. You know, we have a beautiful church facility here at Grace Covenant, gorgeous stained and etched glass. But that beauty means very little if we don't recognize the beauty inside the people that come through our doors. We have musical programs with glorious music, but if people only hear words of praise, healing, or comfort in the music and not in our conversations, then are we really doing what we need to do? We have meaningful classes and programs for our children and youth, but if we don't exhibit those values in the way we live, what are we really teaching them? This is all part of our season of peace, because I thought about that yesterday also as we were coming back from having this experience and understanding how important our connections with other people are, and recognizing that we can't have peace if we don't interact with other people. If we don't take the time to see other people for who they are and to recognize their intrinsic value as a child of God. That is the business and the work of the church. Because I think the more we lift people up, the more we let them understand that they are truly beloved children of God, that they are recognized for who they are, that they're valued, and that they're loved not only by God but by us also. We wouldn't have to have a special season of peace. We'd be living it all the time. Amen.